Some opening shot thoughts. There are a few forms of speech that the First Amendment does not protect, thanks to decades and decades of court cases. In short, those include defamatory speech, child pornography, obscenity, and speech that incites imminent violence. And even those categories are open to interpretation in a court of law. So it appears the highest levels of the Trump administration need to be reminded of those qualifications, as several comments in recent days suggest they are missing the mark. Earlier this week, Attorney General Pam Bondi suggested that the DOJ would go after, quote, hate speech. While the Constitution doesn't fully spell out a category called hate speech, it almost certainly is protected unless it violates those aforementioned restrictions. Bondi faced criticism on both sides of the aisle for her erroneous remarks, and she today walked them back. Also, President Trump announced a $15 billion lawsuit against the New York Times and specific political and investigative reporters there who have reported truthful information that he simply doesn't like. In its response, the Times says, quote, "This lawsuit has no merit. It lacks any legitimate legal claims and instead is an attempt to stifle and discourage independent reporting. The New York Times will not be deterred by intimidation tactics. We will continue to pursue the facts without fear or favor and stand up for journalists' First Amendment right to ask questions on behalf of the American people." Now, this is in addition to a lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal for its reporting on Trump's birthday letter to convicted child sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. That letter, with Trump's signature, has now been made public. In Trump's civilian life, he was famous for his lawsuits, using the court system not necessarily to prove he's right, but to try and intimidate his opponents in the hopes that they heal or they come to a deal. That appears to be the strategy here. And to add insult to injury, the president suggested the DOJ look into another White House reporter for what he says has been unfair coverage. Elected office holders of all levels have always had a contentious relationship with the press covering them. I remember former Illinois House Speaker Mike Madigan. He once called the Chicago Tribune, quote, garbage haulers, for exposing a pattern of corruption that has now landed Madigan behind bars. A core principle of journalism is maintaining a healthy skepticism of people in power. News consumers are certainly free to question whether that skepticism goes too far or doesn't go far enough. The debate over speech is amplified now as a popular right-wing influencer was shot down allegedly because of his political views. The recourse for that is not a crackdown on speech. It's a punishment to the person who allegedly pulled the trigger. Tonight, the Border Patrol ramps up its targeted enforcement across the Chicago area as immigration activists fight back. Tyler Robinson charged on 7 counts, including the murder of Charlie Kirk. How the internet and social media influenced his alleged radicalization. Higher property taxes, a liquor tax, and more garbage collection fees. A blue ribbon panel comes up with recommendations on solving Chicago's budget crisis. Welcome to the Chicago Report. I'm Schutz. Another day, another change of heart from President Trump. After last week backing off threats to send the National Guard to Chicago, the president changed course today, something Governor Pritzker says he can't take seriously.
You can't take anything that he says seriously from one day to the next. He's attacking verbally. Sometimes he attacks sending his agents in. Sometimes he forgets. I think he might be suffering from some dementia. And the next day he'll wake up on the other side of the bed and stop talking about Chicago. So I've never really counted on anything that he said as real.
Now, the president made this statement today saying that folks have asked for him to send federal intervention to Chicago because of the crime rate and the murder rate. Now, it comes as the Department of Homeland Security and Border Patrol have put out social media videos describing their ramped up deportation efforts across the area. They claim they are removing violent criminals off the streets. And joining me now via Zoom is Ere Rendon, head of the Resurrection Project. That's a nonprofit that works with immigrants and refugees. And we should mention we have reached out to the White House and the Department of Homeland Security to talk to representatives. They have not gotten back to us. But Ere Rendon, thanks for talking to us. What are you hearing in terms of enforcement across the area today? How many incidents have there been and where have they been?
Yeah, we've received a lot of information about lots of arrests today. There was quite a bit of ICE activity in the Elgin area. Yesterday, we saw lots of ICE activity in West Chicago. We've seen folks in Melrose Park. and also saw a big ICE enforcement presence last week in the southwest side of Chicago.
Well, I was going to ask you a lot. You're mentioning a lot of suburban areas with known immigrant or Hispanic Latino populations. Does it appear that this is more heavily focused on the suburbs than the city?
It's probably about equal, the amount of presence that's happening in the suburbs and in the city. It just kind of alternates days sometimes. And so we've received, well, the Family Support Hotline has received hundreds of calls daily in terms of spotting ICE, and we've received 95 requests for legal assistance that comes from the hotline, also from IllinoisImmigrationInfo.org to the database of folks that are trying to get legal services. Those have been 95.
And Ere, you know, ICE and Border Patrol have talked about only going after the most violent criminals. Is that what you're seeing on the ground, that it's really only violent criminals being taken? And I should qualify that they have said that if there are other undocumented folks at these houses or places they show up, then they will take them in too.
Yeah, we've been seeing pretty random arrests. So you may have seen a family, mom and dad picked up on Cicero and Pershing over the weekend. We've been seeing today actually a U.S. citizen, maybe 2 U.S. citizens were arrested. And we've been seeing folks that maybe entered over the last few years through an app, actually came in because they applied to come into the U.S. And it just so happens that now immigration has their information, and so they have become easy targets without any criminal arrest. There have been some folks that may have some experience with the criminal justice system, but most of the folks that we're seeing have absolutely no history with the criminal justice system, and some, like, the only thing they may have is a ticket for driving without a driver's license.
And that was what they claimed that Silverio Villegas Gonzalez had, the man that was killed on Friday in an ICE altercation. But I want to get to that in a second. But you said that they've actually taken some actual U.S. citizens or permanent residents. Have those folks been released then?
Yeah, this morning, U.S. citizens were arrested in Elgin, and then eventually were released, yes.
Let me ask you about Silverio Villegas Gonzalez. The DHS has said that he, in this traffic interaction, he fled in his car. He dragged an ICE agent and hit an ICE agent, and then that's why the ICE agent shot him, and he eventually died in the hospital. Does that match up with some of the surveillance video that has come out now and some of the eyewitness accounts that have been on the scene?
Yeah, I mean, I think folks can see for themselves the surveillance video, which clearly demonstrates that Silverio was driving away from the agent, did not drag the agent, did not hit the agent. And instead what happened was he drove away from the scene, and Silverio was then shot and killed.
And if that's indeed the case, is there legal action that his family plans to take, or is there further investigation into what exactly happened? Because I know Governor Pritzker has said that he believes the FBI and Homeland Security have not been forthcoming with the evidence on this.
Yeah, none of us believe that the federal government has been honest, and they don't have a history of being honest. The first thing they did when the new administration took office was actually take down the publicly available database so we could see the actual arrest of folks that was happening in communities, and that was taken down. So since day one, there has been no transparency. We do want to make sure that there's an investigation, and that Silverio's family is able to seek the justice that they deserve.
You know, the governor and the mayor have talked about the chilling impact that this stepped-up enforcement has had. Do you see kids that are not going to school as a result of this, or folks that are just staying home?
There's an overwhelming amount of fear in the communities, and that has resulted in lower attendance rates for children. It's resulting in families having to make difficult decisions if they're going to go to work or not. If they're hearing that there's ICE activity in their suburb or in their neighborhood, it's resulting in families trying to figure out and maneuver when they can go to the grocery stores, if they can go to church. The family that was pulled over on Cicero and Pershing were leaving church actually, and so it's affecting a lot of people's ability to be able to live their regular lives.
All right, Ere Rendon of the Resurrection Project, thank you very much for talking with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Moving on, Tyler Robinson faces 7 Utah state criminal charges in connection with the murder of conservative activist Charlie Kirk, including aggravated murder and felony discharge of a firearm, along with obstruction of justice and witness tampering. Utah County District Attorney Jeff Gray outlines the alleged correspondence between Robinson and a roommate and suspected romantic partner.
The roommate received a text message from Robinson which said, "Drop what you're doing, look under my keyboard." The roommate looked under the keyboard and found a note that stated, quote, "I had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk, and I'm going to take it."
The prosecutor went on to describe some of the dark internet memes appearing on the bullet casings, sign that Robinson's radicalization into an alleged killer might have been largely influenced by his online behavior. And joining us now is Tim Wenninger, professor in the College of Engineering at Notre Dame University and an expert on social media communication. Tim, Professor Wenninger, I should say, thank you so much for joining us. A lot has been mentioned about servers like Discord or 4chan, gaming, and some of the dark corners of the internet. From what we know about this case, what is it? What can you tell us about the sites that this suspect was visiting?
Well, yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me on. I'm sorry that I have to be here to talk about this, but it is an important subject. I think one of the things that we've been seeing over the past, several decades now is more and more online entrenchment among youth. And so folks, I think, like to be in touch with one another. They want to be part of a group. And if you're at school or at work or on the playground or at the lunch table, you always want to find your group. And a lot of people have a difficult time finding their group kind of in real life. And so they turn to these internet boards. There's many sites, and I don't want to list them and name them. And they eventually find their niche. They find their group. And sometimes that group is one that gets deeper and deeper and darker, and eventually gets kicked off of the more mainstream sites and then onto the more fringe sites, and then oftentimes onto chat servers like Discord. Discord isn't really a social media site. It's more of like a chat room, like you're talking to your friends with just chat messages. And that's where we're seeing a lot of these people being pushed towards. And then in those Discord groups, you can talk about whatever you want. And there's no one or no algorithm or no safety mechanism to say, hey, knock that off, or to tamp down on that kind of rhetoric. And so, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, the folks that are visiting certain conversations or chat rooms on these servers might understand what some of these memes that the suspect is referring to. Can you kind of explain? Anyone who sees this as gay, that was one of the alleged things to be written on a bullet casing. Something about, I think,
there's many different variations of this. And so I do want to kind of call back to the prosecutor, Jeff Gray. He actually was asked a question after his press conference saying, do you think that this alleged shooter was radicalized online? And he said that he's not going to speculate. And of course, that might be prudent. However, I think it's fairly obvious based upon what he wrote on the bullet casings, anti-fascist rhetoric, songs from fascist Italy, and other slogans that are, I don't want to repeat here on the air, that very clearly come from what you might call the darker corners of the internet. So I think it's fairly safe to say that this person found himself kind of down that rabbit hole and found himself in a group of people that were fed up and unhappy with maybe the message that someone else was saying, and decided to take action. I thought it was particularly poignant that he called his roommate to look for this note. And where was the note? Well, of course, it was under his keyboard.
Under his keyboard, right? A very important part of the room here, the keyboard, the computer, anything having to do with a screen. You know, there's so much tension in the country over the ideological motives, whether this was left-wing violence or something else. Clearly, the prosecutor says that he had been more ideologically to the left in recent years, angry about what he says is the quote-unquote hate being spewed by Charlie Kirk. But, you know, My question is, on these dark corners of the internet, and when you're 22 years old, is the ideology a very clear left versus right, or is there something else we need to understand about that? Is it more complicated?
Yeah, no, it is absolutely more complicated. Some of these corners of the internet are more contrarian than they are left or right. And so whatever the prevailing culture is at the time, these corners, if you want to call them that, are going to take kind of the opposite side. And then actually, so there's some of these more insidious websites. They came up when Barack Obama was president as kind of a counterculture to Barack Obama, and then when Trump was elected the first time, then it became much more of a libertarian. So they don't really have a coherent rhetoric in so much as they just are against the machine, and we see that right now. The rhetoric that we see on either side is getting turned up. And one of the things that I'm particularly, I don't know, let's say concerned about is when Charlie Kirk was shot, I think we were all kind of holding our breath, like, will he die or will he not? But then people on the left were holding their breath saying, oh, please don't be someone from the left. And the people on the right were saying, oh, please don't be someone from the right. I bet it's someone from the left. And everyone was just waiting in bated breath to point fingers at the other one. And that kind of rhetoric of circling the wagons and pointing fingers needs to be dialed down. Everyone is really passionate about this right now, and I'm afraid that our political leaders, especially, aren't doing enough to kind of calm everyone down, tamp down this heated rhetoric. Instead, I think they're turning the volume up.
Yeah, and I think that's another subject is talking about, if you glance at X or other social media sites, there are folks just openly talking about civil war or just really out there kind of rhetoric. But Tim Wenninger, I have a feeling we'll have to have you back to talk about all these things. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
And up next, a new task force is focused on Chicago's financial future amid a massive budget deficit. Stay with us.